tonight on NewsCenter. Wake up from nuclear delusion, says President Park Geun-hye as she urges North Korea to give up its nuclear program and calls on the graduating cadets to sternly punish them for further provocation. North Korea rejects the Security Council resolution as a criminal act, vowing to take stern actions while its leader orders nuclear weapons to be made ready at a moment's notice. Seoul and Washington officially launched a joint working group to discuss the idea of deploying an advanced missile defense shield in South Korea. China and Russia are not happy. NewsCenter begins right now. It is 8 a.m. in New York, 12 noon in London, and 10 on a Friday night here in Seoul. Hello and welcome to our viewers all across the globe. You're watching Arirang News Center. Anything and everything necessary to make North Korea give up its nuclear ambitions. That's how determined President Park Geun-hye is in getting the Kim Jong-un regime to stop reckless provocations and join dialogue with the international community. The South Korean leader spoke at a ceremony for graduating cadets today. She called on the new military officers to sternly punish the North in case of any further provocations. Our presidential office correspondent Song Ji-sun with President Park's latest remarks.
Attending a commissioning ceremony for graduating military cadets for the fourth consecutive year since taking office, President Park Geun-hye said national security and the safety of the people are the first priorities in state affairs, and called for full military readiness along with stern countermeasures against any North Korean provocation.
국군 장병 여러분, 앞으로 유례 없이 강력한 대북 제재가 시행되면서 북한의 반발과 도발도 더욱 거세질 수 있습니다. 동트기 전 새벽이 가장 어둡듯이 한반도가 평화와 통일로 가는 데 있어 지금이 가장 어려운 마지막 고비라고 생각합니다.
Adding that Pyongyang's nuclear capabilities will only advance if it isn't stopped, President Park pledged Seoul will take all the necessary and effective measures on North Korea until it gives its nuclear ambitions and joins the international community as a responsible member.
이번에는 반드시 북한이 핵을 포기하지 않으면 체제 생존이 불가능하다는 것을 분명히 깨닫도록 해야 합니다. 북한 정권은 핵무기가 체제를 보장한다는 그릇된 망상을 버리고 하루속히 진정한 변화의 길로 나오도록 다시 한번 강력하게 촉구합니다.
In addition to the deployment of U.S. missile defense system THAAD, President Park also called for Seoul's own defensive measures like KAMD, Korea Area Missile Defense, which could complement THAAD in protecting the nation from North Korea's provocations. Song Ji-sun, Arirang News.
Now, for a second day, North Korea appears to be flexing its military muscles in the wake of a United Nations vote meant to cripple the regime's nuclear program. Now, it's called a new resolution a criminal act, and leader Kim Jong-un reportedly ordered his military to be ready to fire nuclear warheads at any moment. For more on this story, our Connie Kim.
A warning of merciless actions, including physical means, was the main message from North Korea in response to the recent UN sanctions on the regime. Coming in less than 2 days since the UN resolution was adopted, North Korea's official Korean Central News Agency emphasized its stance once again, saying its nuclear and long-range missile tests were legal acts of self-protection against the U.S. Ratcheting up tensions on the Korean peninsula, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un has reportedly ordered his military to prepare to fire nuclear warheads at any time. A U.S. defense official cast doubt that Pyongyang has the ability to miniaturize a nuclear weapon, and South Korea downplayed Pyongyang's routine bellicose rhetoric.
North Korea seems to be expressing its will to counter the sanctions imposed by the UN and looking to solidify the regime.
Ahead of an annual South Korea-U.S. military exercise next week, The agency reported Kim has also ordered his military to be in preemptive attack mode, saying enemies are threatening to dissolve the regime. Kim went further, addressing the South Korean president by her name for the first time and claiming that her, quote, madness would only expedite her self-destruction. The young leader's provocative remarks indicate that tensions on the Korean peninsula will continue, especially with the latest UN sanctions resolution on North Korea finally passed. In fact, the escalating tensions are a predictable pattern of behavior exhibited by Pyongyang. In 2013, after the UN Security Council imposed sanctions, the regime also fired short-range projectiles in response. Recent satellite imagery of North Korea shows Pyongyang may be preparing for a rocket engine test, increasing the possibility of another surprise provocation by the unpredictable regime. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
South Korea and the U.S. have begun formal negotiations to discuss the deployment of the Terminal High Altitude Area Defense, or THAAD, system amid heightened tensions on the Korean peninsula. And officials from Seoul and Washington signed an agreement to set up a joint working group today. Our national defense correspondent Kim Hyun-bin joins us live from the Ministry of National Defense in Seoul. Now, Hyun-bin, so is it now official that the two allies are in talks about introducing this sophisticated missile shield to the Korean peninsula?
That's right, Kanyang. Seoul and Washington earlier today signed an agreement to start officially discussions for the possible deployment of THAAD here in Korea.
As part of enhancing Korea-US missile defense readiness, we will discuss the possible deployment of THAAD, which will be managed by US Forces Korea.
The two sides discussed pre-requirements that need ironing out to deploy THAAD on the peninsula, including the location of THAAD, management, safety, and cost-sharing of the U.S. missile defense system. The sides were co-headed by the South Korean Ministry's Director General Chang Kyung-soo and U.S. Forces Korea's Major General Robert Hedlund. The first working group was held here at the ministry at 3 p.m. local time. The ministry says that the deployment of THAAD is being discussed due to the increasing threats from Pyongyang and in response to the regime's fourth nuclear test and long-distance rocket launch earlier this year. Now, China and Russia have voiced their opposition to the deployment, as a missile interceptor could pose a risk to strategic security. Now, China in particular has shown explicit irritation over the ND system, claiming that it could spy on Beijing's military posture. To this, Seoul and Washington have assured that THAAD is purely a defensive system.
Now, Hyun-bin, we've also been learning that the short-distance projectiles that North Korea fired yesterday are, in fact, new additions to the North military hardware.
That's right, Kanye. A military official says that around 8 short-range projectiles that have been fired on Thursday seems to be North Korea's newly developed 300-millimeter multiple rocket launchers. Now, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un is believed to have presided over the launch at Wonsan, Gangwon-do province. Now, this new weapon has a range of up to 200 kilometers, and when fired from the border, can target the newly built U.S. base in Pyeongtaek in Gyeonggi-do province. Now, military officials say that the 300-millimeter multiple rocket launcher is almost ready for placement on the front lines, and added that the South Korean military needs to come up with new countermeasures to neutralize the weaponry. Now, South Korea has been developing its own multiple rocket launcher known as the Chunmoo, but the system only has a range of 80 kilometers, which will not have enough firepower to neutralize North Korea's newly developed 300-millimeter multiple rocket launchers.
So an upgrade in military hardware, perhaps. Thank you, Hyun-bin. Kim Hyun-bin, live from the Ministry of National Defense. So let's dig a bit deeper into the possible deployment of the THAAD battery in South Korea, its significance and ramifications. Live in the studio with me is Dr. Park Kyu-rak, professor at Seoul-based Kookmin University. Dr. Park is a retired colonel of the Republic of the Korea Army. Dr. Park, Colonel Park, welcome to the program. So let's talk about THAAD. Now, we know that the THAAD talks, South Korea and the U.S., it's been, a discussion for years. But why is it now that they're, being discussed of introducing this THAAD battery onto the Korean Peninsula?
First of all, THAAD is very necessary because, as you know, North Korea has about 20 nuclear weapons, and it has almost 1,000 various types of ballistic missiles. If North Korea attacks South Korea with nuclear missiles, we do not have the effective protection system. We have right now a Patriot system, which can intercept the incoming missiles at the height of 15 kilometers. But its destruction ratio, they say, would be about 80%. So it is not 100%. So we need another opportunity to intercept before the Patriot system, which is the THAAD, which could destroy the incoming missiles at the height of 150 kilometers. South Korean government and U.S. forces always thought that it is necessary, but South Korean government thought that it needed the time to persuade people and to support the deployment of THAAD, and U.S. government may need time to decide whether to deploy the THAAD to South Korea or not. Right now, South Korean people, almost 70% of South Korean people support the deployment of THAAD, so they thought that it is the right time to deploy.
Right. So the toughest ever UN sanctions against North Korea has been implemented. But what's more important now is how well the member nations will execute or enforce those measures. Now, is there a possibility that introducing THAAD, of course, which is opposed by China and Russia as well, would negatively impact those countries' enforcement of the UN sanctions?
There are some people who are concerned about that, but I'm not agree with that. Because that, as I told you before, THAAD is owned by U.S. Army. It's just a defensive and a protection for the U.S. force deployed to the other regions. Its range is about just 200 kilometers. It's nothing to do with the interception of ICBM. It is not to protect the mainland United States. So as long as China and Russia does not have any intention to attack South Korea or the U.S. forces in Korea, it does not affect the nuclear deterrence of China and Russia. So as the controversy continues, I think China and Russia recognize the fact, so they don't think that it is a kind of right topic for them to be affected regarding the sanctions.
Sure. Colonel Park, you've spent most of your career life with the Republic of Korea Army. Now tell us, how serious is the situation now in the Korean Peninsula with, of course, North Korea vowing stern actions in response to the UN sanctions? And based on President Park's latest remarks, of course, as recent as today at the Joint Commissioning Ceremony, about her policy, strong, hard policy against North Korea. What is your assessment of the situation now and President Park's policy vis-a-vis North Korea?
Yeah, I think that President Park is thinking that this may be the last opportunity for South Korea to stop the North Korean nuclear ambition. If we allow the situation continues, I think that as the David Albright, who is the physicist of the United States, predicted North Korea can have about 100 nuclear weapons in 2020. If North Korea has that many nuclear weapons, we may not have any options. So he may think that this is the last opportunity to stop the North Korean nuclear ambition. And if we do not solve right now, we will be a very serious situation. And I would like to add one thing. U.S. State Department assessed that the characteristic of Kim Jong-un as a dangerous, unpredictable, prone to violence, and delusion to grandeur. So we are facing the very irrational North Korean leader with very, very dangerous nuclear weapons.
Right. So I'm going to reconfirm this with you. My final question. So is that absolutely critical for the current situation in the Korean Peninsula to defend this nation from North Korea threats? Even worth risking the cooperation of Beijing and Moscow in enforcing UN sanctions?
As I told you before, I don't think they think as importantly as we think about THAAD. They sometimes made some kind of criticism on deployment of THAAD, but they know the exact kind of capabilities of THAAD. So they may not no longer make it as a kind of issue. I would like to add one thing is that if Russia and China does not like the deployment of THAAD to Korean Peninsula, they have to persuade North Korea into denuclearization. If North Korea does not have nuclear weapons, we don't need to deploy THAAD systems to Korea.
All right, Dr. Park Hee-rak, thank you so much for speaking with us tonight. We appreciate it.
Yes, my pleasure.
Now, staying on the topic of China versus the U.S. in this region, Beijing says its military spending will grow by the smallest increase in 6 years in 2016. Some experts say it reflects China's willingness to demonstrate to the West, including the U.S., that China sincerely wants to solve problems through peaceful means. But there's no denying the fact that it also reflects China's slowing economy. Hwang Ji-hye reports.
China says its defense budget for 2016 will rise at the slowest pace since 2010, adding the weaker growth in military spending reflects the state of its economy.
This year, China's defense budget will maintain growth, but the amount of growth will be lower than last year's, between 7 to 8%.
Although the estimate announced on Friday remains higher than China's expected economic growth target of 6.5% to 7% for this year, it's much lower than what was widely expected in military and diplomatic circles. They predicted the figure to reach an impressive rise of 20 to 30%. The defense budget has been posting a double-digit growth for the past 5 years, with that of last year increasing more than 10%. Over mounting tensions with the United States in the South China Sea, Beijing accused Washington of militarizing the hotly contested waters by deploying ships and aircraft.
Expanding construction in the South China Sea is necessary. This is something that the Chinese people support. These islands are considered to be part of our country and should be defended. Defense installations are a necessity.
The United States have conducted a so-called freedom of navigation operations near islands that China controls in the sea. China has been carrying out controversial reclamation work in the islands while stationing advanced weapons. The actual figure of China's military budget will be released on Saturday when the annual meeting of China's legislative body opens. Hwang Ji-hye, Arirang News.
Shifting our focus to domestic politics, Korea's ruling party is keen to pass a slew of key economic bills before the current extraordinary session ends next Thursday. Meanwhile, opposition bloc lawmakers appear to be shifting their attention to preparing for the upcoming general election just 40 days away. Our political correspondent Kim Young-gil has more on this country's parliamentary affairs.
The ruling Saenuri Party on Friday for the last time called on the opposition party lawmakers to pass key economic bills as legislative duties have come to virtually a standstill.
We must pass economic revitalization and labor reform bills within February's extra session. Parliament has the duty to pass bills so that we don't miss a golden opportunity to help boost our economy and create new jobs.
The ruling party's top priority is to pass a bill to promote Korea's service industry and 4 labor reform bills aimed at restructuring Korea's rigid labor market. Therefore, the ruling bloc hopes to open a voting session next week to pass the key pending bills as the current parliamentary session ends on March 10th. However, the main opposition Minju Party of Korea has criticized all of the economic bills passed to date, stressing that nothing was done to help boost Korea's sluggish economy.
The president maintains that if the assembly passes certain key economic bills, it would help rejuvenate Korea's economy. But our economy is slipping into recession.
With April's election nearing, the Minju Party is unlikely to cooperate on passing the bills after the counterterrorism bill, the North Korea Human Rights Bill, and the electoral map bill gained approval. With the new electoral map finalized, Korea's political parties were busy screening candidates' credentials on Friday to make room for some fresh faces in the run-up to the election. After months of political wrangling and political bargaining, the 19th National Assembly is being called a vegetative legislature, one that is unresponsive to calls urging for passage of important bills. Kim Young-gil, Arirang News.
Now, on the other side of the political aisle, the main opposition Minju Party continues to stress the importance of forming a united opposition bloc to win the general elections next month. Well, responding to such calls, members of the People's Party just minutes ago came out with that party's standing. Let's go live to our Shin Se-min at the National Assembly for that. Se-min, what is the latest on that front?
Yes, Kanyang, it's official. An Cheol-soo's People's Party says it is not joining forces with the main opposition, Minju Party of Korea. Now, that announcement just came minutes ago after holding a 2-hour-long general meeting of the party members. Now, the minor opposition party says it is taking an independent route in going ahead with its principle of reforming politics by taking a path that hasn't been attempted. The decision was somewhat unexpected as the members of the People's Party showed differing stances even before going into the general meeting in response to the proposal made by the main opposition Minju Party leader Kim Jong-un. Up until this morning, the Minju Party leader continued to urge the opposition parties to join forces to become the new majority camp at the coming April's general elections, eventually laying the groundwork for governmental change at the presidential election in 2017. Now, Kim Jong-un's proposal, coming just 1 month after the launch of the minor People's Party, was somewhat gaining attention as the call could have empowered the opposition forces by restoring the two-party system in the country. But with the latest, as we just heard, People's Party officially rejecting the call, it looks like the country's political landscape won't be seeing much changes, at least until the coming parliamentary elections. Kanyang?
Thank you, Se-min. Our Shin Se-min from the nation's parliament. Now, South Korea and the U.S. have launched another joint committee, aside from the one on THAAD, this tasked with implementing a revised bilateral nuclear energy partnership accord. The details of the treaty will be further discussed during the committee's first meeting in Seoul next month. Lee Ji-won has this report.
The Ministry of Foreign Affairs announced Friday that a joint high-level committee has been launched between South Korea and the U.S. tasked with implementing a revised bilateral nuclear energy partnership accord, with the first meeting scheduled to take place in Seoul next month. The co-chair of the committee, South Korea's second vice foreign minister Cho Tae-yeol, met with the other co-chair, Elizabeth Sherwood Randall, who is also the U.S. Deputy Secretary of Energy Department, in Washington on Thursday local time to discuss the details. The two also agreed to create 4 working-level subgroups covering respectively the supply of nuclear fuel, promotion of nuclear export, management of spent nuclear fuel, and ensuring nuclear security. The subgroups will report work plans at the first meeting next month. Under the revised deal, South Korea can now research a nuclear reprocessing technology known as pyroprocessing. The agreement also opens the door for South Korea to hold talks with the U.S. to enrich low-level uranium. The revised nuclear pact came into effect last year November after more than 4 years of talks. Lee Ji-won, Arirang News.
We saw Korea and Japan put history behind and attempt to look to the future as it struck a landmark agreement on the issue of Japan's wartime military sex slavery. Now, it was pronounced final and irreversible. But since then, several Japanese officials, including Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, have questioned the validity of the victims' claims. The Japanese Foreign Ministry's website features a statement by the Deputy Foreign Minister made to the UN last month, saying there is no evidence that Korean women were forced into sex slavery. Kwon Jang-ho files this report.
The official website of Japan's Foreign Ministry has uploaded a new document. It's the transcript of an answer given by Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs Shinsuke Sugiyama at a UN panel in February in response to a question on the issue of Japan's wartime sexual slavery. He said that a fact-finding study by the Japanese government in the 1990s found that the forceful taking away of women by the military and government authorities could not be confirmed in any document. He also said that the reported figure of 200,000 victims, or so-called comfort women, also lacked concrete evidence, and that many joined voluntarily. Although this statement was only a small part of the minister's presentation to the UN committee, so far it is the only section being featured on the website. Critics have taken this as a sign that the Japanese government, rather than distancing itself from the statement, has taken steps to acknowledge it. Korea and Japan reached a landmark agreement on the issue in December last year, with many expecting it would be a turning point in bilateral ties. But several Japanese officials have continued to deny Japan's wrongdoings. This includes Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, who at a parliamentary meeting in January reiterated there was no evidence that women were forced into sexual slavery. South Korean Foreign Minister Yoon Byung-se, when asked about Japan's seemingly change in stance on the issue, said that although he may not agree with it, the two nations have agreed in the December deal not to criticize each other on the issue, and that both parties are open to further discussion. As for the former victims, this response is unlikely to appease their anger and frustration. Most of the 44 remaining surviving victims refused to accept the December deal, demanding a direct apology from Abe and for the Japanese government to take legal responsibility. Kwon Jang-ho, Arirang News.
Well, here's a question for you. Can machines overtake human intelligence? A breakthrough moment may come in less than a week from now when the world champion of the ancient board game Go takes on an AI program developed by Google. Korean Lee Se-dol and AlphaGO will go toe-to-toe in the ultimate man versus machine battle. Our Kim Ji-yeon reports on how the human champion thinks the match will play out.
The big match taking place in Seoul between Korean grandmaster Lee Se-dol and AlphaGO, a computer program developed by Google, is gaining a lot of international attention. Lee and AlphaGO will compete in 5 rounds of the ancient game of Go, or Paduk in Korean, starting next Wednesday on March 9th until the 15th. Global IT figures such as Eric Schmidt, executive chairman of Alphabet Incorporation, Google's holding company, will visit Seoul ahead of the match. The competition itself will be aired simultaneously in China and Japan, as well as through Google DeepMind's YouTube channel. Grandmaster Lee, who is currently in Shanghai for the Nongshim Cup World Paduk Championship, says he is not afraid to lose to AlphaGO because he believes he can actually win. 33-year-old Lee says he's anticipating the upcoming match, which is the first official match of Go between a human and artificial intelligence. Grandmaster Lee predicts that the match will either be a clean sweep or a 4-1 win for himself, adding that the first match should indicate how the rest of the games will play out. Grandmaster Lee says he will grant AlphaGo a rematch if he wins, and could be a more difficult match, saying he believes there will be a day computers will outrun humans in the near future. But he adds that day is not today. For now, Grandmaster Lee says he looks forward to seeing his daughter in Korea this weekend and plans to stay with her until his upcoming match with AlphaGo. Up until now, it was believed that the ancient game of Go was a board game that computers couldn't crack due to its complexity. But Google looks to change that, with AlphaGo already defeating European Go champion Hwan Hui 5 times out of 5 tournaments in a test match in October. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
General purpose algorithm.
The government of the Philippines has inspected a North Korean freighter in one of the first acts mandated by new UN Security Council sanctions against Pyongyang. Bruce Harrison is live in the studio with me for more on that inspection. Now, Bruce, countries around the world aren't wasting any time, any minute on implementing those measures.
Well, that's what it looks like. This ship is one of 31 that was blacklisted under the new U.S. sanctions. And this is a sign that the inspection is a sign that at least some UN nations are already to follow through with these mandates, which were approved unanimously. And that means, of course, with the support of China.
The ship is now being held at a port by the Philippines. How did the inspection go, and why is the ship now leaving the port?
Sure, it's still being held there, but the Filipino Coast Guard did not find anything suspicious. They took some dogs trained to detect explosives on board, and they searched the ship and they checked crew documents. The Coast Guard said the reason it's still being held is because the inspection revealed several minor safety problems, including issues with firefighting and electrical equipment. The Coast Guard said that the ship cannot leave port until those issues are fixed. Experts in the shipping industry told Reuters the owners of UN blacklisted ships would have trouble getting the vessels insured, refueled, or even call at foreign foreign ports. One shipping lawyer even told the news agency such ships may be prevented from trading to most places as a result. But another lawyer said the vessel may be able to continue some trade because it would be up to individual member countries to pass legislation to enforce those new UN sanctions. NASA has released an image of a galaxy that's so far away it set a new record for cosmic distance. On Thursday, NASA showed off an engine of the infant galaxy GNZ11. That's its name. It's the most distant galaxy ever seen through the Hubble telescope. NASA also released a video that offers some perspective on just how far away this galaxy is. The video opens by showing the Big Dipper constellation and moves past the Ursa Major constellation. It then zooms several times before arriving at GNZ11. And what's the significance behind the young galaxy? Scientists say it will offer them a peek at what the early universe looked like, and it could also provide some clues about how the universe formed.
Now, if Russian President Vladimir Putin can maintain his current level of support at home, he should have no trouble getting elected in 2018. The longtime Russian leader, in fact, if he wins in 2018, it'll be his fourth time in office, enjoys up to 74% support. 74%.
74%. That's impressive for a leader anywhere in the world. I'll say take it with a grain of salt. This is a government-sponsored poll. But, you know, I'll break down the numbers for you. According to a Russian research center, the Russian research center that took this study, as many as 70% of Russians are prepared to vote for Putin to have another term in 2018. Last week, he spoke about national unity that may be helping boost his support at home while he was addressing the Russian ceasefire in Syria.
The task of the FSB and other organizations is to stop the activity of all those who attempt or may attempt to use nationalistic or xenophobic radical slogans aimed at dividing our society.
As for the rest of the poll, 15% of Russians say they have no intention to support his candidacy in 2018. 11% say they're undecided.
Well, 74% in support. Why is Putin so popular?
Well, I mentioned national unity. Patriotic fervor is another big one. Last year, his numbers went up when he annexed Crimea. Big patriotism thing at home with that. And also in line with patriotic fervor, he's regularly denounced Western nations throughout his different stints in office, and that is always getting him good numbers at home.
A big hero at home. Thank you, Bruce, for today and all of this week.
My pleasure.
Well, the weather here in the capital today was welcoming enough for many people to want to grab a seat outside and enjoy not a hot but iced drink. For more, let's go over to our Ji-hyun at the Weather Center. Ji-hyun, it felt like the end of April today in Seoul, and today was the mildest day of the season, I would imagine.
Indeed, Seoul saw a high of 20.3 degrees Celsius under sunny skies, but rain clouds have been hovering over the southern parts of the country all day long, dropping heavy showers at times, and this will soon be followed by rainfall in the upper parts as well. So 20 to 60 millimeters of rain are expected in most parts, while more than 80 millimeters are expected for the southern coastal regions by tomorrow night. So for those of you planning to be outdoors, you might consider doing so on Sunday, but even then have a mask ready as yellow dust is expected to sweep the entire nation. On that note, let's move on to tomorrow's temperature readings. Daily low here in Seoul will kick off at 11 degrees Celsius. Busan and Jeju will kick off at 10 and 14. And as for the daily highs, Seoul will top out at 13, 17 for Busan, Daejeon, and Gwangju. Now that's Korea for you, and here's a look at the weather conditions around the world.
New UN sanctions on North Korea flooded the news all this week, and although the implementation is an achievement itself, we deliver all related news with a heavy heart. Global efforts to starve Pyongyang of money are aimed at leading North Korea to give up its nuclear ambitions and bringing it back to dialogue, not to inflict more pain on the average North Koreans. We hope the regime quickly wakes up from its delusion and chooses a better path for its people. That is our broadcast on this Friday night. I'm Moon Gun-young. Thank you for staying with us, and we hope to see you right back here, same time Monday on NewsCenter.